I'm kind of curious what Charlie Kirk is going to say about creationism.
My name's Jaden, and the topic I want to raise is about like evolution versus creation. So it's not as political, but it certainly has political implications. And for reference, I was raised Catholic, and it never really resonated with me. It always felt a little overbearing, and I could never find like truth in a Catholic or a Christian worldview. And I started just like reading books and listening to podcasts that talk a lot about evolution and natural selection and those principles. And I find that's a much better lens to look at the world. Like, for instance, you talk about like a meritocracy. All that is natural selection, like the cream rises to the top. I mean, it's apparent in so many fields. Like, look around at all these beautiful buildings. That comes from architecture. Like, the good ideas stick, the bad ideas fall out of the gene pool. And I want to know why, like your thoughts on natural selection and why it doesn't apply to humans.
Yeah, this is not a topic I know the best, but I have strong opinions on, so you have to understand I'm not as literate as I should be. But I'm a strict creationist, but that's fine. But there's spectrums on creationism and evolution. So do you acknowledge that maybe God created evolution as a shepherded evolution throughout time? Because that's a nuanced opinion.
I acknowledge that there's a...
That's not the nuanced opinion, by the way. That's the cope opinion you give when you realize you don't have the evidence anymore, when you realize that there's a bunch of evidence against you, or a bunch of evidence at least supporting evolution, and instead you say, well, even though God is completely unnecessary in this process, I'm going to insert God into the argument unnecessarily because I can't live without believing in God. It's a cope.
Distinct beginning to the universe. Okay. Like Albert Einstein, for instance, against his original view, believed
for sure.
that
So if there's a beginning, is there a beginner?
That's the question. And who is that beginner?
No, but
why is it Christ?
It has to be, right?
No.
Because the law's a law.
No. Don't say yes. There does not need to be a creator. It's very possible that maybe there was a black hole in space and it opened up and it sucked certain chemicals through, and that caused some kind of a reaction which led to an expansion of some sort, which then led to, over time, the formation of planets and everything else. There's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but if you're going to say, well, I guess there's an eternal creator, why can't you then just believe maybe space itself is eternal? Scientists demonstrated the validity of a quantum theory that was first put forth 70 years ago. Humans can make matter out of nothing. Simply manipulating empty space, the pinnacle of physical nothingness, in the right way will inevitably result in something emerging. For example, when two particles collide in the void of empty space, sometimes additional particle-antiparticle pairs appear. There are several conservation laws in the universe. These laws control momentum, charge, energy, and so forth. So within quantum physics, it is possible for something to be brought forth out of physical nothingness. In early 2022, a team of researchers developed powerful enough electric fields in their lab to level the unique properties of graphene. They used the fields to create particle-antiparticle pairs from nothing. This proved that it is possible to create matter out of nothing, a theory initially stated in 1951. So if something can be produced out of nothing, it's quite possible that enough chemicals and particles collided with each other in space to create the Big Bang, which then led to our universe.
The universe has a beginning, end point, right? A beginning point and an end point. Yep. We believe it's God. I can walk you through why I believe that in the shortest period of time. But as far as creation, evolution hinges on far more faith than creation. To believe that the way that we are currently composed and having species change is an act of faith. Now, Darwin was...
We can literally see species changing through evolution. Fossil records showing transitional forms between species. Fossils document the existence of extinct species that are related to present-day species, often displaying transitional features between different groups, like the evolution of whales from land mammals. The fact that he's still using these old-ass talking points, you know, it takes more faith to believe in evolution than God. No, it doesn't, because I actually have fucking evidence that suggests evolution is the correct theory. Charlie Kirk does not have evidence of God.
Darwin was more of an adaptionist than an evolutionist, in the sense that he proved adaptation, but he did not prove evolution.
We literally have seen fruit flies change and evolve so much so in labs that they're no longer able to reproduce with the original fruit fly, which on a scientific level, and by definition means that they were a new species of fruit fly, an entirely new species.
Theorized evolution. He could be right. Oh, I don't think he is. But he through his finches, he wrote that, yes, animals or birds will adjust to the environment of which they are in. We do not have any evidence, nor can you. You can guess in the fossil record of actual species change. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, here's what they found right here. This looks interesting. They found a bird with a dinosaur's skeleton. It had flight feathers like a modern bird's, and a dinosaur-like skeleton with teeth and a long tail. One of the best pieces of evidence that supports evolution is chromosome 2, and specifically the chromosome 2 fusion. It refers to the scientific theory that a human chromosome 2 was formed by the end-to-end fusion of two ancestral chromosomes that remain separate in other primates, like chimpanzees. Estimates suggest this fusion likely happened between 400,000 and 1.5 million years ago. The fusion event is thought to have occurred in a common ancestor of modern humans, leading to the distinct chromosome number in humans compared to other great apes. So humans have 46 chromosomes, great apes have 48. And right here goes into what I was saying before. Human chromosome 2 was formed by the head-to-head fusion of two ancestral chromosomes that remain separate in other primates. How could this have happened if evolution wasn't a thing? It could only have happened if evolution is a thing. Chromosome 2, great evidence for evolution.
There's a lot of psychological things too in humans. Like one example I'll bring up is, I mean, would you say as a general rule of thumb, like women are the sexual gatekeepers and men are the sexual pursuers? Yeah. That distinction can be explained by evolution, right? A female's eggs in her body is a finite resource, whereas a man's sperm is basically infinite, meaning the woman has to protect. There's more of a cost when she has to raise a baby.
But maybe God made it that way, right?
Maybe, but a lot of things like
Charlie Kirk is literally just doing God of the Gaps right now. Well, maybe God just made it that way. Maybe God made it so that our evolutionary natural process would be this way. Like, what?
that point towards evolution of some sort.
For sure, but I think I think you're close because you're marveling in the design.
Yep,
and then therefore we believe it was designed.
I think evolution can give off
No, but the problem is, again, how do you know when something was designed? How do you know if something's built? If you're walking through the woods and you see something is built, is designed by humans, how do you know it's designed? It's because you compare the built, designed thing to the natural world. What creationists are saying is that the natural world was designed and created. So you're comparing creation to determine that it was created? If I find a watch out in the middle of the forest on the ground, the watch can be contrasted to the nature, the natural world surrounding me, and I can tell that the watch was designed and created as opposed to, say, a tree. But what they're saying is that you're walking through a forest of watches, everything is made out of a watch, and then you find a specific watch, you pick up this watch and say, this is proof that God exists. How do you know it's designed if you have no point of reference for comparison?
Impression of design because it is so intricate. Even like something like religion, I would explain in terms of evolution and natural selection. Like over time, religions change. For instance, there's plenty of denominations of Christianity. So, like religion is not a.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think you would agree with our perspective that even looking at this objectively with reason, there's something improbable of our existence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
And that improbability could be a roll of the dice of chromosomal gene mutations over trillions of years. Or it actually could be something a lot simpler, which is there's something above us that just designed us. And so
simple is not always correct. There's no evidence that there's something above us that just designed us, and there's a lot of evidence that this complicated gene mutation thing over billions of years did happen. So you're lacking in evidence for one, you have evidence for the other.
So I actually think the designing argument is far more rational because you look at how we're built, you look at the trillions of chromosomes within us, how our body works, the DNA sequencing. It's hard to believe all that is an act of the dice. And that is what evolution contests, is that it's a...
No, actually, think about it this way. Isn't it possible that if the Big Bang occurred and trillions of different planets come into existence, is it so unlikely that one of those planets would happen to be positioned in the right spot in space to facilitate evolution? Also, they've already done different studies where they had computers type out random numbers to try and get a specific number pattern that they laid out, like 1, 5, 6, 3. Okay, these numbers, can the computer type these numbers? they would have the computer just generate random numbers. I think it was less than 24 hours. The computer got the number correct. On just random chance, spitting numbers out, eventually got the correct sequence.
It would be like rolling snake eyes 23 billion times in a row. That's how improbable evolution is.
My contention with that would be like, evolution is like, it's unchanging. It doesn't put us at the center of everything. So a lot of people explain it's like the good of the species, but truly it's just the good of the gene, passing on the genes that stick. It can be subconscious.
Of course, I don't disagree with any of that. We just think all of that was designed into us,
okay.
right?
And so is your belief that God made the universe and then
I believe
implemented?
So
some
I
form
believe
of
what the
evolution?
scriptures say, which is that God created the earth and then God created man, and that we are here. The period of time I don't get into.
So you don't believe what the evidence says, you believe what the ancient fairy tale book says. Okay, somebody get Charlie Kirk his pixie dust, okay? Because this guy is, he has forgotten about facts. He's living for his feelings, and now magic, apparently.
Strong opinions is 6,000 years, 6 million years. I don't really care that much. I think it's more important morally that God predated the universe. The universe was made at his direction. Then nature was made. Then animals were made. Then man was made in that sequencing. And I think that's an important sequencing.
Yeah, and I agree that there should be, if we believe that there's a start of the universe, there has to be a beginner.
For sure.
And I also like disagree with like ethical subjectivism, where that's like you're entitled to your own moral. But I feel like there is one truth. There has to be.
There has to be, right?
And your argument is God provides us that truth through the Bible. But then why is your truth the truth?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, because through both reason and revelation, though. So God gives us both. Revelation, of course, is the scriptures. Reason is our ability to interact with the natural world to see if the scriptures are actually true. So
Revelation means God told me something. Something that can never be fucking verified. Something that can never be fucking fact-checked. We have no idea if this person is even telling us the truth, that God really came down and told them this thing. For all we know, this guy was just tripping balls on shrooms and now believes himself to be the next prophet. First of all, reason tells you to trust the science, which you're not trusting the science in this case, so I guess reason is just out the window. And then revelation is something that's so fucking pathetic and useless, it is worthless to anybody who you are trying to convince. It's not helpful. It's literally as helpful as saying, well, I had a dream that this thing happened, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Why is Christianity true? Well, first, let's just test the 10 Commandments. If you follow the 10 Commandments, your life will be objectively better and your society will be objectively better, right? I mean, not killing, not murdering, not stealing, honoring your parents, not having anything above the idea of a sovereign God.
Is Charlie Kirk really trying to say that, like, we have to follow God for a better moral whatever? Again, these things are evolutionary, Charlie. How do you think a species would ever survive if you had members of that species just going left and right, killing? The species would die out. Evolutionarily, it makes sense that we would have some kind of an innate conscious or moral problem with an act of murder. And even more so, if it's true that not murdering and not stealing and things like this will make my life better, which they will, then why do I need God? If tomorrow the Bible vanished from existence, would the law just change to be like, thou shall murder? No. We don't need God for this.
For 1 day a week, not lying. These are things that we can all agree, like, okay, that's a good way to build society. But let me just one thing. The two miracles that Christianity hinges upon is creation, which I think you're almost there-ish, that there was a beginning to everything. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And then the resurrection. And the resurrection is the greatest, most documented miracle in human history.
It's not the most documented miracle in human history. Not at all. What you have is a bunch of ancient claims, similar to how you have a bunch of claims of being abducted by aliens. It's not evidence, it's an ancient claim. That's all you fucking have. And I'm sorry, but if your two biggest Christian miracles are creationism, when there's zero evidence for it, and the resurrection, when there's zero evidence for it, then I think your two miracles are not miracles at all. In fact, I think it's a miracle that somebody as retarded as Charlie Kirk managed to build a platform this fucking massive. That's what I think is miraculous here. So, some of the original Gospels didn't include any actual sightings of Christ after his resurrection, just like claims that he had risen. The issue is that most scholars have concluded that the final 12 verses were not part of the original Gospel. Manuscripts contain at least 5 different endings for Mark. The style of the longer ending seems different from the rest of Mark. The evidence for the longer ending weakens the farther back you go in the history of manuscripts. So let that be known, that that wasn't even included in some of the original Gospels.
It defies every other historical explanation that, so in order for an atheist to be able to wrestle the resurrection, you must answer, who is Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ, we're not really entirely sure. It is believed that somebody named Jesus Christ did exist at one point or another, but simply somebody who exists named Jesus Christ at one point does not in fact prove that this person exists as the Son of God.
Okay, what happened to his body?
Maybe it decomposed somewhere? Just if we can't find his body doesn't mean he rose from the dead. Let me ask you this. If you saw your friend get shot and killed, and then you buried your friend, and you were crying over your friend dying, and then 3 days later you showed up and the grave was dug up, and the casket was there empty, would your initial conclusion be, well, my friend must have risen from the dead? No, you'd probably think maybe somebody stole the body or something. There are a plethora of explanations as to where Jesus' body could be or could have gone or something that don't include him rising from the dead. And also, mind you, earlier Charlie Kirk tried to say it's much simpler to believe that God made the world or anything. It's a lot simpler to believe that humans don't usually rise from the dead. Therefore, if Jesus died, he probably didn't rise from the dead.
Why did all of his followers die a death voluntarily afterward?
Again, why did all of his followers die a death voluntarily? Why do Muslim extremists die deaths voluntarily for their faith? Does that mean that Islam is true? I'm not saying that, or I don't think that many atheists even believe that all the disciples or the people who claim to be followers of Christ or whatnot are all just lying. They probably did sincerely believe some of these things. But just them sincerely believing something doesn't really mean that much. Because again, people sincerely believed in Islam enough to fly fucking airplanes into the Twin Towers. So people just believing hard enough in God that they're willing to die for their faith doesn't prove that the faith, that the thing they believe in is actually true.
Why did we have all these people that from the first threshold, the second threshold, eyewitnesses say that Jesus Christ rose from the dead? So all of this, canon, and I don't expect you to believe it, is hinging on that one event. So
again, a bunch of people just saying this thing happened. How do you know that's not just stories that have been passed down, passed through the generations, passed through the ages? There's a lot of people that all say or share similar experiences of alien abduction. A bunch of people have also claimed to see Elvis walking around from the dead. Is Elvis risen from the dead? No. Why do we dismiss all of their claims?
So it's not about Jonah the whale, it's not about parting the Red Sea, it's creation, resurrection, that's it. Yeah, and if those two things are true, everything else in the Bible can be true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree that,
So he said, so if the resurrection and creation is true, that means everything else in the Bible must be true. That is false. That's the fallacy of composition. I knew there was something wrong with that. It's a logical fallacy that occurs when someone assumes that something is true of the whole because it is true of a part. For example, this tire is made of rubber, so the vehicle it's part of is also made of rubber. This is fallacious because vehicles have many parts, most of which are not made of rubber.
It would be almost impossible to say, why would people die to say, Jesus died on the cross for me and I saw it. Why would I admit, I'm from your perspective, why would I admit, yeah, I saw him die and rise from the dead.
Well, no, yeah, for example, and so again, the answer people would give is like the Jonestown cult, that people can do really crazy stuff if they're convinced by a certain leader. I'm not convinced by that argument. But for example, like James the half-brother.
Why are you not convinced by that argument? We've literally seen mass suicides take place because all of the followers were convinced by their leader to do this thing. Is he just not convinced by this because it's inconvenient for his argument, maybe?
But for example, like James the half-brother of Jesus, Paul, who had no reason whatsoever, formerly Saul, persecuted Jews, led a great life, converted to Christianity, died a terrible death in prison, from the upside-down resurrection of Thomas. Like, these people had no reason to die the way they did, yet they saw something that compelled them to all of a sudden put everything on the line, which was the belief that Jesus rose from the dead. Now, this was crazy. The Romans gave them an opportunity, saying, you can believe in Jesus, you just can't say he rose from the dead. They said, no, I refuse to give an inch on that. And so there's something there so powerful that inspired an early church.
This just doesn't help because there are so many other religious beliefs that have inspired change or inspired revolution, or people died or they were martyrs for their faith. This happens all the time for so many different religions. I have not heard really any compelling arguments here from Kirk. Wow.
Everything on the line, which was the belief.
Yeah, again, people just putting everything on the line doesn't really mean that much.
There so powerful that inspired an early church.
And other people just like saying like, yeah, this must have happened or something. Again, historians document martyrs of all different kinds of religions. That doesn't mean that their religion is true. There's no evidence the early Christians could have survived if they recanted. Yeah, it's possible that he was just making that up as well. Charlie Kirk is just, he manages to say a whole lot of nothing. It's very impressive. It's quite the skill.
If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today.